get an opportunity to see into it as you're passing. And you see the stylised way in which the Victorians you know, did their entrance, and their doorways in particular were very detailed in terms of the style of the door, with its brass knockers and spray plates on it. And here you have the Shelbourne Hotel here in front of you, just to my left, and you see the two bronze Nubian torchbearers holding up the metal portico. It's really exquisite detail when you compare it to the adjoining Victorian plainness, I suppose, of it. Its famous bar is the Saddle Room, and is well worth having a look. It's where the high polloi of Dublin society, I suppose, would drink. Would that be a clear on the...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Treat yourself if you get a chance.
We're turning left into Dawson Street, and a famous member of Dublin City Council, Joshua Dawson, who was a property developer in the early Georgian period, and built himself a little house in 1710, just coming up here on your right hand side. And he didn't like it because it was too noisy. So he decided to sell it. Here it is here, just on your right. He decided to sell it to Dublin Corporation, of which he was a member, in 1715. And it has since that time been the residence of the Lord Mayor of Dublin. You would have noticed the metal porch at the front of it. That was added in 1900 to celebrate the visit of Queen Elizabeth on one of her 4 journeys to Dublin, but that was her last before she died. She was very old on her last visit. I think it was the summer of 1900. We're approaching the bottom of Dawson Street, and straight ahead of you is, I suppose, the back of the library at Trinity College. And now Trinity plays a very important part in the life of Dublin City. The Dublin City Council work very closely with the universities on research and development programmes and facilitating PhD students with work. The building just here on your right is number 1 Nassau Street, and that's the home of the Provost of Trinity College. Now, I don't know if you're going to get an opportunity to visit the house. I think you may be, and if you are, you're in for a magnificent treat, because it has the finest saloon room on the first floor in the entire city, and it has the most exquisite, probably a little bit over the top, stucco work and plaster work in it. Very ornate, but absolutely beautiful. And we're going to make our way now into, I suppose, the grand parade that is College Green. And it's a significant landmark in the city, in that it was the original site of the Irish Parliament. In 1729, the Parliament decided they needed a new building, and decided that they were going to spend £6,000 on the creation of a new Parliament. You see it here in front of you, and we'll sweep around by it. It was the first double-chamber purpose-built Parliament building in the world, as I understand it. The second one being Stormont, up in Belfast, and it was designed by a young architect called Stuart Lovett Pearce, who was also a member of the Parliament. So you can see all of these connections that there are between Dublin Corporation and property owners and members of Parliament, and the fact that this magnificent building was built. Now it took a time to be built, but it served as the Irish Parliament and as I say, a double chamber, the House of Lords as well as the House of Commons, until the Free State and Catholic emancipation came, and we'll talk about that as we go around. But it has a magnificent, I suppose, corridor that you will see replicated in Dublin Castle when we visit it later. Here we have the front of Trinity College with Oliver Goldsmith and Burke standing at the front of it. And as we sweep around the magnificent Parliament House, which is now Bank of Ireland, we're into a street called Westmoreland Street, the famous Lord Westmoreland. And in the late Georgian period, the Dublin Corporation established a wide streets commission and developed a processional route right from the castle all the way down to O'Connell Street. And you can see the width of the street from, I suppose, when we go into the medieval city, compared to the narrowness of the plot lines that there were then. This is a much more open, inviting place. And if you look north, you see the picture, the statue of Daniel O'Connell immediately in front of us, across on O'Connell Bridge. Now, he was known as the Liberator, and he fought for Catholic emancipation, which allowed Catholics to stand for the Parliament that we just passed. And he fought bravely for Catholic emancipation, which led to the repeal of the Act of Union and gave us our own Parliament. His association with Notre Dame is 58 Merrion Square, which is the headquarters of Notre Dame in Ireland, and that was his home. So there's a great historic connection there. The famous bridge you see here is known affectionately as the Halfpenny Bridge. Its real name is the Liffey Bridge, but it became known as the Halfpenny Bridge because there was a toll on it. You paid a halfpenny to cross it, which was the equivalent to what it would have cost you if you were going across on a ferry. And one of our newest bridges, our Millennium Bridge here, which was unveiled for the Millennium, and we'll see a number of new bridges as we move on. We're now on to the Liffey, and I suppose this is the lifeblood of the city. I mean, it's famous in Joyce, as you know, in Finnegan's Wake. It was immortalised as the lifeblood of the city. There are a number of very important buildings along the passage of the river. Not least of them, you see the dome here of the forecourts on my right. That was designed by a famous architect called James Gandon, who was an English Huguenot, who established a young architectural practice in England, came over here in 1760 to participate in a competition for a new royal exchange. And as we're crossing here the bridge, if you look to your left, you'd see the Royal Exchange right at the top of the street. And that is now the Dublin City Hall. But Gandon didn't get the commission for the Royal Exchange. Instead, a local architect called Thomas Cooley did. But Gandon persevered and came back to Dublin in the 1780s and won the contract to build the Custom House, which we will see later. And this is one of his most famous pieces of high Georgian architecture's most magnificent colonnaded building, which is the forecourts, which was heavily damaged in the Civil War in 1922, and a lot of the records of the city were lost in that fire. It now houses the High Court and the Supreme Court, and we'll be looking at its modern replacement for the Central Criminal Court later on as we go up the river. We're now going to leave the river and make our way up into the medieval city. And as we turn the corner here into Bridge Street, on your left hand side you'll see a pub, and it's the oldest in Dublin. It predates, it's right outside the city walls, so I think it's probably 12th, 13th century. You see it here, the Brazen Head. I don't think anybody knows its age because it's come through so many different periods, but you can see it there, the courtyard. This is a very old part of the city, and running right along the spine of this street here, Cook Street, you have the old city wall. So we're outside of the medieval city, but if you like, now we are passing into the old medieval city and the Norman castle. So you see here the wall on your left-hand side with St. Audien's Church on your left-hand side, and that St. Audien's was the parish church of the Dublin Corporation. So every year at the election of the Lord Mayor and the burgess and aldermen of the city, they would march in procession from the Royal Exchange in their beautiful garbs and the sword and mace of the city, and would march in procession down High Street to a service in the St. Audien's Church here, just lying right beside the city wall. And the church immediately beside it is also called St. Audien's Church, but that's St. Audien's Catholic Church, and was built after Catholic emancipation, I suppose, as a statement that, you know, we could have our own churches then. It now acts as the parish church for the Polish community in Dublin. And this area of the city is known as the Liberties, and it was granted a liberty by Henry II for merchants to carry on trade within the area. So a lot of the street names relate to the type of work that we're doing. For instance, the building on your right hand side is the Tailors' Hall. The Tailors' Hall, so that would have been the Guild of Tailors in the city. And coming up to on our left would be Wine Tavern Street and La Rochelle, and these would have been wine merchants and would have been exporting wine for France, and had their carried on their trade in the area. It also in later Huguenot times, it became the centre for the production of linen. So it has a very long history, and we'll see some of it later on as we're passing when we leave Dublin Castle. But on your left-hand side is Christ Church Cathedral, which was founded in 1029 and is associated, its most famous archbishop is St. Lawrence O'Toole. But a cathedral has been on the site since 1029. I suppose it's famous for it has a 64-metre long vault underneath it, and it's well worth a visit. Its association with Henry II is fairly poignant in a sense that after he had Thomas a Becket murdered and he did his penance for it, he came to Dublin in Christmas of that year and received Holy Communion for the first time since the murder of Thomas a Becket, and made it a very public showing of his confession, if you like, to the murder of Thomas a Becket. But I suppose he would do that, wouldn't he? Being a king and all of that. So here we are at the side of the Royal Exchange, which is now City Hall, and the upper yard of the entrance to Dublin Castle. And I know we were going to visit the state apartments here, so I'll tell you a little bit more about the castle as we're getting out. Thank you.